Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing tonight? Good. Great. All right, well, welcome to our second annual Women in Forensics discussion panel and Q&A. If you don't know me already, my name is Lexi Jackson, and I'm the president of the Forensic Science Club here at Loyola, and I have the pleasure of hosting tonight. So to start off, I just wanted to give a brief overview of our order of events tonight. So we are going to begin with Dr. Burgess, who is joining us over Zoom. You might be able to see her tiny little picture up there. Following her presentation, we're just going to delve into a short Q&A session that's dedicated exclusively to Dr. Burgess, just to avoid any possible hiccups. And then we're going to transition into the in-person section of the event, where we'll be hearing from Ms. Marion Davidson and Sarah Cailean. And we will hold a short Q&A session after all of the speakers have presented. All right, so Dr. Burgess, I'm going to pull up your slides. Which slide set did you want to start with, the sexual abuse cases or Doe versus McLeod?
Right, okay, and I'll give a little introduction.
Which one do you want to start with? The sexual assault one? Or
Yeah, the elder sexual assault one.
All right, so I just want
That's it, yeah.
Dr. Burgess real quick. Dr. Burgess is a forensic nurse and professor at the Connell School of Nursing at Boston College. She is best known for her role in pioneering the assessment and treatment of victims of trauma and abuse. And her research with victims began when she co-founded one of the very first hospital-based crisis counseling programs at Boston City Hospital. She then worked with FBI Academy special agents to study serial offenders and the links between child abuse, juvenile delinquency, and subsequent perpetration. Her research and work with the FBI Academy is featured in the popular Netflix series Mindhunter, which some of you may know of. And her enduring legacy extends to her private practice and her current work with the Cold Case Foundation, where she seeks justice for unresolved. So without further delay, please join me in welcoming Dr. Ann Burgess.
Okay, thank you very much, Lexi. I was trying to think about what topic to bring to you tonight, and I have a case that I have to testify at a trial up in Vermont this coming Monday, and it is a sexual abuse nursing home case. And so I thought maybe that would be, it's a case where it's an 84-year-old woman. She's got dementia. She is only competent in terms of knowing her first name. She can't tell you where she is or what the date is. Those are usually the three main questions that are asked. And they're on the unit was a male resident who was known to be very freely running around the unit with other women. And so he really pretty much focused in on this particular woman, and she has tried to dissuade him in any way she could. He even managed to get a key somehow, even though she was keeping her door locked. He got a key. And then I think his family also got a special sitter to try to keep him inside. So the defense is going to be to me as to, couldn't I be wrong that she was really trying to reject him? Why couldn't she could have been wanting to have all of this attention and sexual fondling and kissing and all of that kind of thing. So that's going to be the defense, with saying that she really wanted this or could consent to it. And then my argument that I didn't think that was so. So we're going to see. I'm surprised it's going to trial. I would think that a jury would not find it too interesting to the defense, but we'll have to see how it goes. So I went through some of my other cases, and I thought from the forensic standpoint, I'm going to show you, we'll give you a little kind of quiz and see what you think on some of these cases. So if we could have the first slide, Lexi. Okay, yeah. So what are some of the differences that we want to look at in forensics in elders? Well, elders obviously differ from younger populations in terms of the cause, in terms of the response to injury, and in terms of outcome. And these are all usually in a case that I'm doing, I would have to speak to. Really, the most common cause of elders in any kind of accident type of things are falls. That elders can be very, their mobility could be very, their balance could be off, I should say that. So anyway, and sexual abuse isn't a very common type of activity, you would say. Response to injury, we know that geriatric trauma disrupts the physiological balance. It's slower to recover. And outcome can be decreased survival rate. So those are just some of the kind of parameters that you have to be aware of when you're looking at some. So let's see if we can look at some cases. I think I have a case. Yeah, case of Lily. She's 91 years old. She's deaf. She has 3 children. She's been in a nursing home for 18 months when all of a sudden there was a behavior change. She started refusing any bathing. She then started refusing any medications. She would only let one aide bathe her. And then when she told her daughter to bring in a gun so she could shoot someone, that finally got people's attention. So in the next slide, on February of the 12th, she falls, she's taken to a hospital. So she's taken out of the nursing home, taken to a hospital for 4 days, and then returns to the nursing home. When she returns to the nursing home on the 18th, she develops what we call an acute abdomen. In other words, it's very tight, it's not soft, and so forth. It's very hard. Her abdomen's very hard. So they take her back to the hospital for a colonoscopy, and they do a routine urine analysis. They catheterize her, get a urine analysis, and the nurse looks under the microscope and identifies 5 non-motile sperm. She dies 2 days later. So those are kind of the facts of the case. So I get called in on the case, and here are the questions I'm asked. Where did the sperm originate? Was it catheter contamination? What caused the acute abdomen? And is the nursing home liable? What do you all think? Maybe we can have kind of show of hands. How many think that maybe these non-motile sperm got into the catheter? Anyone think that happened? I mean, it could, couldn't it? Or could it? Because the defense can argue that it could happen. And all you have to do is put a little bit of doubt in the jury's mind. So that's one question. The second question is the acute abdomen. Where's that come from? Clearly, you've got an infection in the intestine. Something's wrong. And what is it that she dies from? Right? Not going to die from sexual abuse, usually. And then as the nursing home, did the nursing home in some way contribute to these non-motile sperm? Now, who knows anything? First of all, you'd have to do a little research on these non-motile sperm to determine why are they not moving? How old are they, kind of thing. But you're going to have to somehow explain it. And then, of course, the ultimate question is the nursing home liable? Did she get such an infection or is it the hospital that's liable? Which one is liable? So those were the questions, and that was a case that actually did not go to trial. It did get settled, which was, I think, the better outcome to get in that, because they never could actually determine the basis of the sperm. But the important thing I thought is that it was the nurse that took the slide and looked under the microscope and found it. So you can't deny that. So that's one case. The next case and the next will go to Mary. Now, Mary is 96. She's a widow. She's in a nursing home for 3 years. And the nursing assistant notices some bruising to her right inner thigh that she didn't have before. So she notified the daughter, Mary's daughter, and they took Mary to the hospital for an exam. In the next slide, we'll see there is the bruising. So the questions are, what caused the bruising? What are your possible hypotheses? Was this self-injury? Did she somehow injure herself? Was this trauma from a procedure like a catheterization? I've had that as one of the possible. Was it a sexual assault? Or did she somehow accidentally injure herself? So those are the questions that I was asked to have to opine to, if you will, from that. So you can see the picture. How do you get, first of all, how do you get bruising? How much bruising does it take? What's the color of the bruising? Does that make a difference? I know there's been a lot of controversy over color bruising to try to determine if it's new, 1 day old, 5 days old, whatever. And at one time they used to have coloring of bruising that what you're seeing there is pretty red. That it then goes more, the blue gets added, and then by the time it gets resolved, it's kind of green and orange. We all have had bruising, so you can kind of look at your own bruising to see how long. And does it make a difference if you're 96 years old versus if you're 26 years old? So all of that has to be factored in. Could there have been a self-injury? Could she have, you'd have to think about, and I'm sure that the defense will be very creative in the types of injuries they think could happen from someone. But certainly a trauma from a procedure, I've really had more of those as having to defend or to argue against that with the, usually it's a catheterization that's a poor catheterization. Or was it sexual assault? Or was it some accidental injury, not that she caused herself, but some other accidental injury? But would you agree that that doesn't seem to be normal, that it's a pretty extensive injury, you know, to get that much? And of course, we don't have, if we pull the diaper off, you could see that the redness goes all the way over to the genital area, but not on the other side. It's just on her right leg. So as I said, if I were there, I would ask for a show of hands of how many think this could be a trauma from a procedure versus a sexual assault. If it's a sexual assault, what do you have to do? This is where the forensics come in. You're going to have to do some pretty good detective work. We could ask Sarah Cailean to help us, is who she would want to interview, what she would look at. She probably would tell you, obviously, it doesn't have to be male. Don't forget if it's accidental or a procedure. But if it's an assault, you're going to pretty much think it might be a male. So I don't know, Sarah, if you wanted to make a quick comment on that. I saw your hand went up.
Well, my hand went up because I'm aligning my fingers to the, so like the interior portion of the bruise, like closer. I'm not a nurse, so I'm gonna get the
Okay.
But it looks like you can see a handprint or like 3 finger marks up here, where if you're forcing somebody, and the hammer, so everything looks like a nail, but it looks like a sexual assault.
Yeah, that's a good observation, right? So that you can almost say, that would be excellent to be able to say somebody's hand was pushing her leg up, kind of thing. Now that wouldn't necessarily qualify as a sexual assault, or would it? The injury goes extensively in towards the pelvic area. But anyway, anyone else want to put their opinion in? Anyway, I said it was a sexual assault. I mean, that's what they called me in for. And we did find that there were opportunities of the males. I think it was a resident that was a possible person. Yeah. Okay, should we move on to the next case? See how good they are on this one. Now we've got Eva. And Eva is 89. She's a widow. Now she's got dementia, and she even has a diagnosis of cerebral atrophy. I spelled that right. But anyway, that just means that her, they did probably some comparative brain scans to notice that the brain was shrinking. She had a prior fracture of her left hip. She can open her eyes, but she does not speak. Now, that's not necessarily unusual in your elders, and that's one of the problems, is you're not going to get or be able to get much information from them. But it's always, you always want to know where her room is, and she's the last room on the corridor and the furthest from the nurse's station. And we've always found that that can be people can try to use that as a way to avoid any staff kind of thing. But anyway, that just is a little point of information, which you'd always want to try to gather as much information when you're doing any kind of an assessment. Okay, next slide. Now, she also has what's called the separation of the symphysis pubis. I don't know if we have any nursing students there, but that is something that nursing students certainly should know. And it's the in the pelvic area, it's the bone that is used. There's a time when that's normal, and that's normal when somebody is having a baby, that the symphysis pubis opens so that the baby's head and body can come through the birth canal. However, she's 89 and we know she's not having a baby. So this is abnormal for an 89-year-old. She's lying in fetal position. She's in great pain. And you've got swelling and dark bruising now to the abdomen. So we have another case where there's bruising. And there is bruising between the thighs that extend way back to the rectum. So you've got, if you remember from Mary, in Eva, it goes all the way back to the pelvis to the back. And the doctor did come in and he gave his opinion that he thought it could be metastatic disease. It could be some type of cancer, or it could be some kind of fracture, again, an accidental injury, or abuse. And I was so thankful that he had put the abuse in there because this was a few years back, but he did say that it also could come from abuse. So let's take a look at her picture and see what you think. Oh, she was also being treated for a bladder infection. That's important. They did not do a rape kit, but she had a hematoma in the inguinal area. That's, well, everybody know where your inguinal area is. I can't show you. But anyway, she had a triangular shape, 20 centimeter by 10 by 10 with the base toward the umbilicus. And she had a very purulent discharge coming from her pelvic area. So those give us pretty good indication that something abnormal is going on. It's an infection. Where does she get the infection? And bladder infections, I have to say, are not unusual in elders. But this bruising is very unusual. And you're going to get a picture of that. And of course, the purulent discharge just even emphasizes how bad the infection is. Okay, now I think we go to oh no, we've got some more lab findings. Urine sample is positive for skin flora, which doesn't mean anything as far as too much about abuse. But there's lack of what they call trichomonas, yeast, or clue cells. They did do a rape kit, but it was done after 72 hours, which is really it's too long. And but it was inconclusive for chlamydia. And they made the recommendation to do a repeat test. Now, chlamydia is mainly a sexually transmitted disease. She's 89. She's been in the hospital. So where does it's looking more and more like it may be a sexual abuse. Okay, next slide. Okay, there's the bruising. Now you can see where that's very different than what in Mary's case, right? So the question is, how does she get the bruising? That's pretty extensive, and it's bilaterals, both sides. And it's got enough green, yellow that it's old, right? It's not like Mary, who was bright red, right? So is that because somebody is forcing her legs up? She gets sexually assaulted. You certainly can't use a bad catheterization story. But the defense, as I said, is always very creative. And so the next slide is going to tell you what they think caused the bruising. You see the bruising?
Mhm.
They said it was this this is a type of restraint. Well, it's not really a restraint. It's an older version of, they would put some chucks in there and then they would tie those 4 strings around her waist. And they said, well, maybe she had it too tight, that they had put it too tight. Now, my argument to that is if they're putting chucks in there or pads or whatever, they're soft. They're not going to cause any bruising. So, and those waist highs would go up higher than where you saw the bruising. So in my opinion, that this was certainly more going to be on the abuse side than on any accidental kind of matter. And that's what we supported the doctor's opinion that of the 3 he gave, that it was abuse. Anyone have any comment on that? All's quiet on the home front. Okay. Anyone disagree? Come on, anybody want to be on the defense side and disagree? Well, the important thing is this is where you can use photos to make your argument, and they can be very, very powerful. That they always want to have some photos, and now with iPhones, it's very easy for someone to take a photo and have it available. As I do more of these types of cases, that's what family are doing, to take photos and to have them as part of the chart. So I think that's it. I can have, oh, well, that's a causation, what caused the bruising. And again, is the nursing home liable? This is where these civil suits, you have to find someone who isn't doing their job. You know, were they negligent? Did they know, was this some rogue male resident that was getting access to the females? Or it could be a staff person. We've had as many staff people abused. I've got now about 100 cases of nursing home cases with patient has dementia, and that's very hard because you can't get any kind of a much of a statement. But I will tell you that you always want to interview the daughter of because very often the nursing home patient will tell the daughter what's going on, and they may do it in a rather disguised way. The one I'm going to be doing on Monday, the resident said to her daughter, she worried about the daughter, saying that the big man's going to come back, and if you stay here, he's going to rape you. Now, that may sound kind of, it does sound a little bit odd, but when you get an idea that there is a man that we do have that was, I call a predator, because he's going around bothering all of the residents, he was big. He was 6'2", whereas she is 5 foot. She was 5'2" and weighed about 120. He weighed 210. So you've got a huge physical differential. And in this case, well, I really felt that the nursing home was liable. So that's that. I think that's the end of the slides on there, isn't it, Lexi? I'm at 6:30. Is that you want me to take questions, or you want to quick do the one I also sent, the custodial sexual, Doe versus McLeod. This was a case that was out of, I want to say Illinois. You can go to the first slide. It was a very interesting case. It was a civil complaint where the victim would go to, McLeod was the counselor in the jail. This is a case in the jail. And she would go there to make phone calls. She could call her daughter once, I think it's like once a week. And on 2 occasions, he demanded and received oral sex, and on 2 other times had non-consensual intercourse with Doe. Illinois law, of course, prohibits sex between inmates and prison workers. And in fact, if they have it, they have to file what's called a PREA. It's a prison response thing. Next slide, real quick. Now, Sexton was the investigator. he was called in to investigate, and he talked to Doe about her experience with McLeod. And he had received information from an unidentified source. The unidentified source happened to be one of the other women that were in jail with Andrea's her first name. And she was afraid of retaliation, so that's why she didn't report it. But eventually, Doe did discuss her experience with the investigator, but then was transferred against her will to another prison. She knew that was going to happen if she told, and sure enough, it did. So not only could she not go through her weekly phone call with her 9-year-old daughter, but she couldn't continue her cosmetology classes that she had been taking. So they really punished her. They did let McLeod go, the counselor, and he did not cooperate, obviously, with litigation. So then in the next slide, we can see what happened. So Richard McLeod never showed up to defend himself. Something of our client alleged happened is taken as a matter of law to be true. So the state never had a chance to say this never happened. But the primary defenses in the case, there was the warden, a female warden named Burke, and the investigator Sexton. And they didn't get a report. So they got the report finally in 2016. And you can imagine how this is going on. She was in prison, in jail, because she was doing drugs with another friend of hers, a male friend and a female friend. They took, I guess, a pretty heavy hit of Cailean that particular night, and everybody woke up except the friend. And they charged her with conspiracy to a murder, and she was sentenced for 7 years. She had a little 9-year-old daughter. I mean, it was, I never had a case like that. Maybe Sarah could tell us about that. But anyway, she got put, even though everybody, the male and the other, and Andrea woke up. Doe, I should say, woke up. Okay, and the next one, I'm anxious to see what you think. The jury awarded $8 million in compensatory damages and 11.3 in punitive against the prison counselor McLeod, the lead investigator Sexton, and warden Margaret Burke. Doe was locked up in this Lincoln prison for most of her sentence that she served, and other duties. McLeod was responsible for all of these weekly court-approved phone calls that he wasn't doing. And the next slide does have a picture of her. I usually ask what you think it is. We got one more slide, I think. Let's see. Yeah, there's the attorney in the blue outfit, and that's the victim. It was interesting. She almost didn't want to testify, and the poor lawyers were afraid she had to testify. And as the week went, it was a week's trial, and as the week went on, she got stronger and stronger, and she did a great job testifying. So it's a real win, I think, for, they obviously will cut the award way down, but I think everybody was gasping at the amount of how many $1 million she got. So I'm anxious to see when it's finally over how much she gets. But it certainly, the jury was furious, very angry at the way that the prison had worked. So I just wanted to put that in. It was a great case to work with as a all-female law partnership, which was wonderful, and they did a great job. And they really prepared me well. It's one of the few times I felt really prepared going in. We used PowerPoint, and we went through it, and I had given two different tests so I could show the difference between how she was at one point and then at another. And I think that was very important for the jury to hear. So happy to, anytime anyone is going to court, happy to give them a little support in what to do. Okay, that does it. I think I'm over my time, Lexi. I'm happy to do whatever you want, whether there are anything on elder abuse or anything on custodial sexual assault, which goes on. Either take questions now, or I will be staying on to hear everybody, and I can be on for the last part of the segment. Should we do that?
Yeah, all right, so we will take about, I think, 10 minutes of questions just for Dr. Burgess right now. And does anyone have any thoughts, questions? You can say thoughts on like the previous case, or just questions about what Dr. Burgess has done. Yes.
My question is, what made Dr. Burgess like shift from like, because I think her prior work was in younger adults and rape victims to now the elderly and rape victims of sexual assault with that.
All right, so I don't know if you heard that, Dr. Burgess, but
Mm.
someone asked what made you
Yeah.
from younger victims to working with more elderly victims.
Oh, the range in victim ages
Yes.
and how does it makes a big difference. You have to really change your.
She's asking what made you switch from focusing on younger people.
Oh,
to
what
elderly.
made me change? It was a topic that was very, very thin in the literature. There wasn't anything on it. I was getting more and more of these cases. And so I was curious to see how much elders would differ. And I just got into it because nobody else were taking these cases. And I also do a lot of cases where there's like an autistic child or something, because people either are expert in one area or both or the other area, but not in both. Not that I was in any way expert in elder or in disabled persons, but you get there if you have enough cases. And so my task now is to write up the the sexual abuse of when you have a person with dementia. I've got to get that out in the literature. I've got to get more people doing these cases because they are, as I said, I've had over 100 just in the years I've been doing work. So there's a big need for people trained in this area.
Yeah.
What are some of the most challenging cases you've worked on, and how did you navigate those challenges?
So Robin asks, what are some of the most challenging cases that you've worked on and how did you navigate those challenges?
Well, I don't know. Well, I've done a lot of cases. The one that I'm surprised at that has come back is the Menendez case. I did that and I vowed I would never do another court case in my life. That was a case from nightmare of a case. I was at University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and I had to travel back and forth to Los Angeles. And 3 separate times over that, I had to do they had 2 separate juries. Eric Menendez had one, Lyle Menendez had his own. And so I had to sometimes talk to I was on Eric's team. Usually in these kinds of cases, they team up, the lawyers team up. And so it was grueling because the theory was, the abuse excuse, there's nothing, these were just greedy kids that wanted money. Well, I shot that one down in my own mind because they had all the money they needed. They had wealthy parents and there was nothing else I could find of why they would shotgun their parents. And so I realized it had to be in the family. There had to be something going on in the family. So anyway, that is my answer to you. I am going to write a comparative study on the Lizzie Borden case, which is Lizzie Borden. I felt, even though she was acquitted, I felt she killed her parents. So you have the 2 parents things and then the Menendez. So we're going to see how I could compare those 2 cases.
Thank you. That sounds really interesting.
I can't wait.
All right, does anyone have any other questions for Dr. Burgess? All right, okay, so I guess we will switch over. Dr. Burgess, I'm just going to mute you just so we don't get any feedback or anything, but
Okay.
all right, so next we are honored to welcome Loyola's very own Marion Davidson to our panel. Ms. Davidson is a PhD candidate in biological anthropology at University College London. She has an MS in bioarchaeology and forensic anthropology from UCL as well. Loyola is her first full-time lecturing position, and she is a volunteer forensic anthropologist with Cranfield Recovery and Identification of Conflict Casualties, which is a UK-based organization that assists in the investigation, identification, and repatriation of missing World War II US soldiers. from different sites in Europe. So please join me in welcoming Miss Davidson.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here. Thanks for coming and spending your Friday night here. As you said, my name is Marion Davidson. I consider myself a biological anthropologist. I'm also studying forensic anthropology, and now that I've moved into Loyola, I'm also studying general forensics, mostly pattern analysis is what I'm interested in now. At UCL, I'm in the Department of Security Crime Sciences and the Center for Forensic Sciences, and then I'm also jointly studying the Institute of Archaeology. So I'm a big fan of interdisciplinary research. I wanted to talk about, because I'm a new baby in the field, I'm nowhere near as experienced as Dr. Burgess. The path that I took to get to forensics was not at all in my plans. I was a very competitive gymnast when I was younger. I was spotted for the 2016 Olympics by USA Gymnastics. And when I was about 16, I was burnt out and I told my mom I couldn't do it anymore. I switched to dance. I ended up as a dance major in college, but it never felt like what I was supposed to be doing. I just didn't, I don't know, I didn't love it the way that I used to love gymnastics. So I didn't know what to do, and my family had spent tens of thousands of dollars on my training. So I ended up with a double major. So I have a BFA in dance, but I also added a degree in anthropology. In order to do that, I took an extra year. So if you have to stay in school for longer, it's totally fine. When I graduated, I had no idea what I was going to do. I had 2 degrees and I wasn't sure what I enjoyed. So I actually ended up moving to London. And I picked a graduate program at University College London that interested me. It was bioarchaeology and forensic anthropology. It was the first deadline of all of the grad programs that I applied to, and I was accepted. So I just picked up and moved to England. And I absolutely loved it. I was able to do extensive field search and crime scene investigation training, a lot of osteological training. And I just fell in love with the program and with London completely. And I then finished my master's and I studied for my research cognitive bias in the forensic anthropology methods. So I was really fortunate to present to AAFS, which is the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. And then eventually I published in the Australian Journal of Forensic Sciences. It was this conference that I would say changed my career path the most. It's what made me decide to go into forensic archaeology. And this is because in 1966, my mom's cousin Johnny was shot down in Vietnam. He had been in the service for 3 years. He was 25 years old. He was in the Air Force and he was on a reconnaissance mission with a colleague who was Major Stuart Andrews. They contacted camp. They said that they were going to look at some campfires, and then they never made it back to base. They searched for 6 days and they never found them. In 1973, about 600 prisoners of war were released, and my mom's cousin Johnny was not one of them. So about 5 years later, they declared him presumptively dead and missing in action. So my mom wore a bracelet, as is my aunt's, with his name on it for as long as I can remember, and you're supposed to wear it until they come home. And something that I had almost completely forgotten about was that in 2006, he did come home. The DPAA, which at the time was JPAC, found and identified his remains in Vietnam. They brought him home. He's now buried at Arlington. And at that AFS conference, I met Dr. Greg Berg, who was the man that signed off on the osteological analysis of the identification of my family's cousin. And my aunt actually happens to live in Baltimore, which is where the conference was. And so Greg invited my aunt to our anthropology reception, and watching my aunt meet the man that identified her cousin 40 years after he was shot down was a life-changing experience. And that's when I decided that this is what I wanted to do. I ended up going back to England for my PhD. I've done in that time maybe 10 conference presentations. I've done about 20 guest lectures. I have a rather interdisciplinary research interest, but the biggest thing that I've taken away from this is the opportunity to help bring these people home. So I was fortunate enough to join CRIC, the Cranfield Recovery and Identification of Conflict Casualties team. I was sent to Italy for my first deployment, and we helped excavate. We were actually looking for a World War II, 3 servicemen who were shot down in the 40s. And I wasn't able to go back for this trip. The diabetes, I have type 1 diabetic, the heat in the summer wasn't the best for management for it. So I moved to Desport, and I was able to help them with a case in Germany, which in 2023, we were able to, the team, the Cranfield Recovery team, were able to identify and bring home Staff Sergeant Mills from a location in Germany from World War II. So I never ever planned to be here. I was supposed to be at the Olympics, and then I was supposed to be on Broadway, and I was supposed to be a professional dancer. But I ended up here, and I couldn't be more happy. So forensic archaeology is most of what I do, as well as then research and education in forensic anthropology. And I really love Loyola. It's a really fun first job. That's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And I'm so happy that you joined us here at Loyola. It's so great. Just realized that I have not been sharing with you, Dr. Burgess. Sorry about that. Give me 1 second. All right. So last but certainly not least, we have Sarah Cailean joining us today. Sarah's distinguished career in law enforcement and her expertise in criminal behavior make her an invaluable addition to our panel. We are so happy to have her here. So Sarah is a former police officer and sex crimes detective and is known for her work in law enforcement and with true crime media. She's co-created, produced, and hosted the docu-series Hell in the Heartland and the successful true crime podcast, Why Can't We Talk About Amanda's Mom? Currently, she serves as a civilian special investigator for the Mobile County, Alabama Sheriff's Office, leading cold case homicide investigations. Additionally, she is a team investigator for the Cold Case Foundation and a member of the Vidot Society. Sarah began her law enforcement career in 1998, specializing in criminal behavior. She holds certifications as an instructor for police academies and is working on a master's thesis in sociopathic predatory behavior escalation. Notably, she's played a key role in an investigative task force targeting online sexual predators with an impressive 100% conviction rate during her time at the Groveport Police Department in Ohio. So please join me in extending a warm welcome to Sarah. Thank you so much.
Definitely didn't need all of that. So, make sure I have, is this the little clicker?
Yes. You can also use the keyboard if you'd like.
Oh, yeah, well, look at that. Okay. Well, good evening. Thank you, Lexi and Bree and everyone at Loyola for hosting this event. I am enormously grateful and honored to have been invited. And, you know, I look around this room and I am not surprised at all to see the faces that I see, because while many portrayals and representations of just the broad forensics fields are still laboring under the belief that forensics disciplines are composed primarily of men, everyone in this room knows better, right? And every chance we have to highlight this and celebrate, I know, see this one poor, like there's just like a couple of male faces here. But I do think that every chance we have to highlight this and celebrate the incredible women working in forensics should be championed. So I'm grateful to Lexi for even hosting this. Now, for me, getting into this work was something that was probably fate, if you believe in such things, though it took me longer to accept the path on which I ultimately found my footing. Like Miss Davidson, I began very, very young in the arts. I was a professional child actor. And I was on that trajectory for a very long time. But throughout my life and in my childhood, I have very clear memories at points throughout where I can look back and see that I was fascinated with criminal investigations, beginning all the way back at age 6. when I followed with rapt attention the developments in the Adam Walsh abduction and murder. In 5th grade, I opted into a special enrichment class that taught the bare bones basics of crime scene investigation, such as they were in 1985. It's how old I am. And I became obsessed with solving the case. Like we had like tape, and we would do charcoal shadings off of like actual pencils. And then you would use the tape to like lift fingerprints and stuff. It was absolutely enthralling though. And I know I drove my teachers crazy through the entire project. And then progressing on through, in high school, one of my history teachers, a man named Fred Lawrence, turned out to have been Ted Bundy's personal minister in the hours leading up to his execution. And when he returned to class, I went to school in Gainesville, Florida, just about 20 minutes away from where Bundy was executed. And when Mr. Lawrence came back to class, our class, it was a very progressive school, was part of the University of Florida, and basically everybody revolted and held Mr. Lawrence hostage. We said, well, we didn't, a lot of the students said, we will not go forward, we will not let you talk until you tell us why you would go do that. And to me, that didn't really seem like the most interesting question. Mr. Lawrence was wonderful, he went around the room, let everybody ask their questions, let everybody express their frustration with anything that kind of supported Bundy as they saw it. But what I discovered in that classroom that day was this narrow focus that would eventually become the center of my professional life. And that was, I did not care why he had done that. He was a Methodist minister. It made sense to me that if somebody asked for a minister, he would go do it. What I wanted more than anything in the world to understand was what made Bundy tick. What made killers like him tick? Why were they the way they were? And how are their minds so different from most? I continue to ignore these signs in my life though. And it took about 10 years, almost exactly a decade later in my early 20s. I finally accepted that studying criminal psychology just, for fun was never going to be enough for me. So I decided to pursue a career in law enforcement. It was the baby's first day in uniform. At that time, I saw it as the only road to the kind of investigations that I wanted to do. The behavioral science unit was the only place I could do that work. And so that meant eventually landing in the FBI, or so I thought at the time. Now, in my first week at the academy, I was bored and broke, and I picked up a used copy of a book that somebody else had left behind in one of the student lounges, and it was the very recently published Mindhunter by John Douglas. Now, it confirmed for me that chasing down serial predators was very much my goal, but even then, I had a sense that this book wasn't quite the whole story. So I started to do my own research. And guys, when I say my own research, I mean in libraries without Google or Wikipedia. You'll have no idea how good you have it. But what I started to kind of piece together and figure out was that the real science behind the story, the actual mind doing the bulk of the hunting, belonged to a woman. You may be familiar with her. The inspiration and the drive that I derived from recognizing that this field, one that I up till then had largely understood to be overwhelmingly dominated by men, was actually pioneered by a woman, that it cannot be overstated how important that was to me. I spent the next 10 years primarily in a uniform and a cruiser, and I learned a tremendous amount in that time. I learned things that I absolutely use in my work today, long since removed from the days of driving fast and yelling at people in the middle of the night, which, let's face it, is the what's really going on with patrol cops on third shift. But because I was with a relatively small police department, I did get a wide variety of experiences. And I found that the time I spent in the detective bureau working sex crimes in particular was the most interesting as well as the most rewarding. It was clear that though I enjoyed my patrol work, I had not lost sight of the larger goal looming in the distance. Okay. Now, when I'm asked to talk about my my career, I often gloss over the next transition when I speak about it because it's a lot less shiny and fun or exciting than the rest of it. But because we are in this room and because this field is populated by the demographic that it is populated by, I do think it's important to cover what happened next for me. And the fact is, I had always planned to go back to school to study criminal psychology. I had, though, hoped to do it in conjunction with my work as a commissioned officer, which would allow me to rise through the ranks while I beefed up my credentials. So remember, at the time, I thought the FBI was the only place I could do the work I wanted to do. And moving over from municipal policing to the Bureau is a lot easier if your resume is bigger and shinier and more impressive. But the choice was ultimately not left to me. I left my department, retired from commissioned police work as part of a settlement reached following a 2-year battle and gender discrimination lawsuit that I had to file with the federal EEOC. My chief had tried to fire me for having a baby. Full stop. That was it. My baby, my daughter, who is now 19, was born in 2004. My fight began in 2004. And it continued on through 2007, 2008. So like even you youths were all alive when this was happening. This was not that long ago. I was only the second female at my department and I was the first one to have ever had a child. And apparently that just made brains explode. It took a long time. It was brutal and bruising and heartbreaking in ways that I am like still talking about in therapy today. And in the end, I technically won. But it did mean walking away. And so that meant what I decided at that point was rather than simply walking away, I was going to walk in a different direction. So rethinking how I might get to the goal that I still wanted, necessity became the mother of invention. So I studied as much as I could, formally and informally. I dove headfirst into criminology and I have never regretted a second of it. I have busted my ass, but I have also been in exactly the right place at exactly the right time, just luck, really, frequently enough that the opportunity to re-examine a cold case fell into my lap in 2016. Initially, I was invited to take a look at the 1999 double disappearance of 16-year-old besties Laura Bible and Ashley Freeman, and then the murder of Ashley's parents, Danny and Kathy Freeman, in Welch, Oklahoma. I was originally asked by a writer who was wanting to do a true crime book about the case. Eventually, the Bible family joined in this request, and I very accidentally became a cold case consultant. Something I'm still not entirely sure is a thing, but don't tell anybody that because that's what I do. The Bible Freeman case led me to Mobile, Alabama, where I initially had only hoped to peek at the files housed there following that sheriff department's arrest and conviction of serial killer Jeremy Jones, who was a suspect in a number of Oklahoma cases, including Laura's and Ashley's. But after a few conversations with the head of their major crimes unit, I was asked to start re-examining some of their cold cases, and I have never really left. In the 8 years since I first began this consultancy-based work, I've become a member of several cold case investigative groups, including the VDOT Society and Cold Case Foundation. And I have worked with Dr. Burgess and several other individuals to create a cold case consultation group. And that is the one that I am the most proud to be a part of, truly. The bulk of the real casework I have done has been through these groups, and now in my formal status as a special investigator for Mobile County, handling their cold cases with serial or sexual homicide features. Imposter syndrome is real, particularly among women, and in order to be a good role model for all you young people, I am fighting every instinct in me to stop myself from saying how I am not always sure that I belong in every room I find myself working in these days. But the fact is, between training, academics, and real world work, I've spent more than 25 years doing this now. So maybe I'm not like faking it till I make it anymore. Last week, I met with the sheriff and DA of Cherokee County, Kansas, which is just over the Oklahoma border, along with their chief of detectives. Through some mutual contacts I had offered months ago for myself, as well as the group that Dr. Burgess and I created to look at the 1992 murder of a 20-year-old woman named Jennifer Judd. I had heard about Jennifer's case back in 2016 on my first trip to that part of the country, and it has lived rent-free in my head ever since. To be honest, I had no idea if they were even going to let me look at documents. When I sat down in that room with them, I was like hoping they were going to let me see stuff that should by all rights be public record. But we spoke for about an hour, and in the end, they handed me a hard drive with the entire case file, nearly 32 years worth of documents, and said they have 2 more cases for me when we're done with this one. I'm not entirely sure what the big takeaway of this from me to you will all be for tonight. But this is a strange career that I have kind of cobbled together. It has been an unconventional journey, a lot like Miss Davidson's. And I believe I'm really just starting to hit my stride, so I assume it's going to continue for years to come. But I do hope, especially as young women and some young men, diving headfirst into forensics disciplines, that if you ever hit anything that feels like a dead end in your road, you will take that opportunity to create a whole new path and cobble together your own unconventional journey.
Great, thank you so much. So now we're going to move into our Q&A session part of the event. You can feel free to ask questions to any of our presenters. If you want to take a seat. That way. Oh my God. I know, it's right up there, so.
Yes.
Emotional support.
All right. So I know it's gonna be hard for making the, yes. And it's gonna be a little awkward for whoever asks the first question, but is anyone brave enough? Yes.
My first question's for Ms. Cailean. Do you think like nowadays, like if someone did want to go like the route that like you were wanting to go in initially, do you think that going the investigative route like with the police is like the ideal per se? Like you should start there to get some background, or like I know how you said like make your own unconventional path, but like what does that I guess look like nowadays with like everything else that's like more modern, I guess? I don't know.
I think so that everybody could hear, the question was, is it still kind of ideal to go the law enforcement trajectory first if you want to get more into investigations? To be completely honest with you, I just don't think it's as necessary as it was even 10 years ago. I feel like there was very little opportunity to find yourself in a position to really investigate cases, serious casework, without having that, you know, the commission, the badge with it. And it just seems like there are more and more ways now that you can be involved in something like that without having to go that route. And there are fantastic aspects of that route, and there are some real drawbacks to that route. And, you know, without knowing individually, you know, your personality, your hardwiring and everything, I wouldn't know which that would look like. But if it's not something that you find yourself passionate about, I would say you don't have to do that. There are so many other ways you can pursue. And one of the things that I'm finding, and, you know, with Dr. Burgess doing a lot of this as well with these sorts of like consultation type groups that we are in, is we're kind of starting to just like a little bit crack open this like need to know basis that law enforcement has about serious investigations. And so, you know, the more people who are out there saying, I know what I'm doing, let me help, the more they, you know, the more opportunities there will be along the way. It's still going to be tough, but you know, you just kick in some doors. You'll be all right.
Thank you.
Do you find that it's often hard to work with like different communities or different people?
Find what?
You find it hard to work with different people or different units?
Like different police agencies specifically? Yeah, I'm kind of a snob about the police agencies I'll work with, because I think there's a lot of get myself in trouble. Everybody's probably recording. There's a lot done wrong in policing in America. right now, a lot. And so I really only want to work with agencies that I think have a vision of moving forward, having transparency with their community, who are willing to recognize that problems in the past or treatments of marginalized victims are probably why most of these cases go cold. Not all, but most of them go cold in the first place. And if they aren't going to embrace something like that, I just don't get past the front door, really.
This question is kind of for all of the conference managers, but I noticed that like each one of you has a story about, I guess, early on kind of dropping everything from your original hometown and kind of traveling, whether it's for school or whether it's for investigative cases. And I was just wondering how, at any point in that traveling, did you ever feel fearful that I guess like the endeavor wasn't going to be fruitful for you or successful in that way? And like, were there any doubts that you had in traveling so far? Like leaving family, stuff like that.
Yeah, I had no doubts. I did a study abroad in London for my undergrad, and I just fell in love with the city. And I knew that I wasn't dancing anymore, and I didn't want to be in the Long Island, New York area. I wasn't a California dancer. It wasn't happening. But I loved London. So I ended up in grad school because I said I really want to be in a place that I enjoy. And so I found a way to get myself to London. It wasn't part of my plan at all to end up doing a PhD and working in forensic archaeology. But London felt like home, so I followed it there. And I had no reservations for leaving my family on the East Coast and heading over there because that's where I felt most at home.
Yeah, I did the same thing actually. Before I went into law enforcement, I also did I'm just gonna go live in England for a while, and I did that, and I didn't love it, but no, I think it's sort of the same thing. I was probably, I was in my early 20s when I was like, I'm just gonna abandon everything I've done and go do this other thing. So no, you're indestructible. Your frontal lobe isn't finished developing. Like there are no consequences. No, not at all. But yes, as I get older, there is a lot more of the like, I have a mortgage and college tuition to pay and stuff, like, is this worth it? But, I think so. Dr. Burgess?
So I don't know if you heard the original question, but if you moved around or anything at the beginning of your career, did you ever have any doubts about that? How was moving far away from your family, if you did, how did that feel?
That for me?
Yes.
I don't like to move away anywhere. But I had a quick question about the London discussion you were having. I have in my class, I have a student came up to me, and she's an exchange student from London, and she wanted to know what she really likes this whole area of psychology and forensics and so forth, and she wants to know what she can do when she goes back home to London. And I don't, do you have any suggestions? I guess I'd have to start there. What could I suggest to her?
Is she an undergrad?
I don't know whether she's taking the class for graduate or undergraduate credit. I think she's just taking the class.
Because, well, I'm partial to UCL, but they have really good research opportunities. So if you're looking for working in psychology related to forensics.
So what should but where should she go to look for a job?
University College London has a lot of research opportunities.
Okay, University of London, okay. I had spoken one time at the new Scotland Yard, but I didn't know I said if she had any contacts there, she could use my name to see if but I don't know about that now, but that's a good suggestion to go for a research job. That'd be good.
There's a professor at UCL that focuses on decision-making in forensic science. So if she's interested in anything like that, I can connect her to my advisor.
Good suggestions. Thank you. I was going to also say, when Sarah was talking, that one of the best things I think that any young person going into the field try to get in as much on cases, try to build your cases, because you will always be able to use those. And I think that we try to do that for our students at Boston College, is we once a week have a meeting where they have to research certain cases and learn how to do that, and then we discuss it with in the group. But get as much experience as you can with cases. You can, not that you have to do them, but just listen to them, or if they're going to be discussing them. I don't know whether Loyola has a special case discussion course or anything like that, but I know that's been invaluable for us working on super sleuths. It's great to have all the cases as backlogs. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, echoing what Dr. Burgess said, the more you look at, even if it really is just you like rabbit holing at 2 a.m. and like studying a case and then looking at another one that's similar and stuff, the more that database builds up in your own head, the more it's gonna make sense. You know what I mean? Like it seems like an obvious thing, like with the fingerprints on the leg, that was like the first thing I jumped at. But that's because now I could probably rattle off 10 cases where I saw like a bunch of bruising, and then you just see the pattern of a hand, and that is sort of begins to unravel the whole thing. And so it's, you know, it is just that, just building a database in your brain of cases, even if you're not in the room for them.
The other thing is make sure you keep a little notebook, because if you you can always, even if it's just the name of the case, and you know, like the Hornberger case, the Idaho case, you know, that's going to be in 10 years, that will be looked at. Hopefully there'll be a decision by then, but and just a few little words that will remind you, that will kind of trigger your memory for it. That case is important. The Idaho case, the Huberman case, the Delphi murders, you know, those are ones that are going on now, that hopefully are going to be handled. I guess I don't know why the Idaho has been really taking a toll of time.
You have your hand up.
My question is for Professor Davidson. Do you have advice for students who want to conduct and publish research?
Ooh, conducting research? Yes, do it. It's amazing. It's incredible. I would suggest looking for somebody at university who's doing research in an area that you could be interested in, and talk to them. It's a lot easier doing your first research with some guidance and some help. I would also suggest reading as many research articles as you can. I know they're annoying to read, and they're a lot to understand, but just like building your network with cases, the more that you read on the literature, the more you're going to understand it, the more you're going to be able to have your own ideas for research studies. And more than just having ideas for fun pieces of research, you're going to find the gaps that really need filling. And so then your research will also be impactful, and it'll make a difference, especially in forensic science.
University of New Haven.
Yeah.
I think too, I would want to say that knowing what the most up-to-date research is can actually lead to developments in casework. The Jennifer Judd case, for example, she was stabbed 9 times, and that, you know, got me thinking at one point years ago when I first started looking at it, I was like, what did the number of stab wounds tell us? Surely somebody has studied this, and lo and behold, of course they have. There are multiple studies that talk about the correlation, or that, you know, the percentage of likelihood that a certain number of stab wounds and up is indicative of a sexually motivated homicide versus something else. And so knowing stuff like that will help you. And can I tell one of your stories? I'm gonna tell one of Anne's stories. So the way I know it's okay. This was over wine at the lake house, you guys. That's my client. When like everybody, like if you've seen Mindhunter or read the book or just sort of know the mythology behind it, it was that, you know, Douglas and Ressler were out on road school, and a detective told them about Dr. Burgess's work and said that if you want to really study these guys, you should bring her in. And it wasn't until Dr. Burgess told me that that detective was a woman, and was also a forensic site nurse who had become a detective, and it was because she had been reading Anne's studies. So yes, read the studies.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, read and connect.
I would also add that if you're, like if you want to go into practicing, to still be friends with researchers, and if you want to do research, you have to still be friends with practitioners. During any of my classes, I'll say the connection, the discussion between researchers and practitioners all the time, because right now I think there's a big disconnect and our research isn't applicable and the practitioners don't know what we do have that could be helpful because we're just not talking to each other. So you want to be friends with people in both of the worlds.
For you, what is your routine like when you take on cases?
The question is, what is your routine like when you take on cases? A friend of mine refers to me as the Marie Kondo of crime. Because the very first thing I do, like what I will do, I've got some traveling for the next week, but when I get home again, and I'm home for all of April, I will take that hard drive that was given to me on the Jennifer Judd case. I will take a notebook, as Dr. Burgess said, and I will begin going through and building a color-coded spreadsheet. I love nothing more than color coding, and not just because it's pretty, but because, you know, I assign a color to victims, to witnesses, to suspects, to somebody who I'm not sure if they're a witness or a suspect, right? Everything, forensic information gets its own color code, vehicle information gets its own color code. And as I go through, I will literally read every single page, and this is cold cases specifically, right? So a lot of times you're just dealing with paperwork. I will go through and every single name goes into the spreadsheet. Every license plate goes into the spreadsheet. Every witness statement, even if it doesn't look like it has anything to do with this, just the person's name, their contact, whatever goes into the spreadsheet. And then I go, once that is done, and I've gone through the entire case file, which is often, you know, thousands of pages, then I go back to the beginning and I read it again, now knowing like, wait, what did that guy, who was that? I know that name, and then I can just really quickly search him and him. And then that helps me begin to sort of like my mind just kind of make a picture, and then all that like the red string stuff is like happening in my brain, and I'm starting to get a clearer picture. And then from there, once I'm like, okay, this guy's name is all over this too much and it's in innocuous ways, but why is he here all the time? I want to look more at him, and so on and so forth. And so then that's when I get into the like boots on the ground and like starting to talk to people. Although I will say, and this is probably true for any case, I would imagine it's true for forensic anthropology too. At times you're going to hit a plateau or a dead end, and the best thing you can do is literally go back to the beginning again. I treat every case when I come in on it as though it has never been investigated. I don't take anything for granted that was in the in previous investigators' work, not because I don't trust them, but because it doesn't help me to understand the case. And I also don't just take myself at face value. Whenever you hit a dead end, go back to the beginning.
Hey, Sarah, I have a question for you. If you've got so much information, is there anything that you could use AI for, machine learning?
I bet there is.
Yeah.
I'm not well versed in it enough to know what that would even look like.
Well, what we're suggesting is if you run it through AI, the machine learning, it will come up with what they call the hot topics. And then you can develop, if you're going to be doing any interviews, for example, it will give you the topics that you might not have thought of for that particular person, so that when you do the interview, you could ask about that.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to try to use in clinical work.
Great, well, maybe I should come up there and Victor and I can sit
Yeah.
down with the tribe and put it into his system.
Yeah, we want to get everybody up to speed on that. We can talk about what we're doing. We just got our first paper accepted for threat assessment. It's all for threat assessment. And how can we classify, I guess is the word, the level of threat when it comes into a police department. You know, they say, I'm going to blow up, you know, the some building. And how would you rank that? Is that just a grievance, or is there something, has he got some research behind it? Has he started thinking about it, you know, that kind of thing? But I really want to encourage all you people to be thinking that that's going to be the next technology, I guess we'll say, that has to be introduced into forensics. And it sounds like you've got a new case, that would be a prime place where you could put some of it into the machine. It does it like in a second. It can take, we did the Kaczynski manifesto, which was 37,000 pages. And it ran it in a second or 2 seconds, maybe.
I'll talk to Victor then and see if he wants to try.
Yeah.
I guess for everyone, like, what is your next endeavor? What's the next, I guess, investigative analysis or research or study that you would like to do?
Yeah, 100%.
The next thing that you see technology that you can get more investigation or get your hands on.
So I need to finish my PhD. I'm about 2 years overdue. So I need to stop finding new projects and just do what I'm supposed to be doing. But machine learning, AI, 3D modeling and printing is the next big thing in forensic science. So research-wise, I'm really interested in taking CT scans and the DICOM data from that, producing 3D models of bones, and then seeing how we can use those in teaching osteology for a couple of reasons. One being the ethical issues with our collections of skeletal remains, especially in the US. Most of them are just unclaimed soldiers from World War I and World War II, where nobody ever can get their body. So we took them for science. And there's a large ethical problem with that. So if we can have contemporary data and we can 3D print something that is as replicable to a real bone as possible, that would allow us to broaden where we're teaching and not have to use these collections that are slightly very unethically collected. So I'm personally really interested in teaching and training the forensic anthros moving forward, but machine learning, AI, 3D scanning, and 3D printing is the up and coming.
Apparently I'm the outlier that's not even thought about the computers. I'm just starting the Jennifer Judd case, and I still have the Bergeron and Williams cases down in Mobile County, as well as a couple of others. But I think one of the things that I kind of want to do through the Judd case, that dude, Jeremy Jones, the one, he's fairly well known to criminologists and academics as just one of the most like unrepentantly evil monsters in a skin suit who has ever walked the face of the earth. But he's not terribly well known in like true crime circles or sort of in the broader registry. And one of the things that has happened over the last couple of years is that I have sort of accidentally amassed the case files of like through various connections and various agencies I've worked with, at least 9 or 10 of the homicides of the, like, depending on what day you ask him, 14 to 20 homicides that Jeremy Jones claims responsibility for. And the thing about Jones is that he does tell an awful lot of lies, but he also tells a lot of truths. And so I am never interested in centering these dudes. Like, that's not why I do this work. That's not what I'm here for. Dr. Burgess created the field of victimology for a reason, and I believe in that. But I do think that the number of family members and loved ones I have spoken to from cases that Jones claimed responsibility for, that then investigators dismissed him on and said, nah, I think he's lying because he didn't have this right, he didn't have this right and stuff. I want to dive into all of them and kind of try and unthread which ones he may be responsible for and which ones he was just making it up, because I know too many of these people now personally to not be feeling like that, you know, most of the victims' families you talk to will tell you there is no such thing as closure. That is like a hokey term that is used in the media a lot, but it's not real. But there is some peace of mind that comes with answers. And so I think my next sort of big project separate from an individual case would be, diving into all of Jones's mess and seeing what's real and what's not.
We can look at that.
Dr. Burgess, what's next for you?
What is next for me? Well, the AI and the machine learning. I'm glad to hear that it's Wells going in Loyola. That's great, great news. But that I think is where it's at, especially when you have a lot of data, and then we can never have. I was going to ask you, Sarah. You remember we talked? I guess it's been several months about the missing men. These missing
Yes.
men, and they just had one,
Yeah.
that Riley of Nashville. And the minute I heard that there was a river nearby or a lake or something, I said, that's where they're going to find them.
Find him.
And sure enough, they did. Yeah.
Yeah, same. I had the same thought.
So was it accidental? Was it, did something else happen?
Everybody's aware of this, that there is just this pattern, particularly in the Midwest, of young men stumbling drunk out of bars and turning up in rivers several days later, or bodies of water. And in a lot of them, the cause of death is undetermined. Some of them, it's clearly homicide, and some it's clearly accidental. And so the question is, is there a very efficient, thorough serial killer, or is it just bars need to do a better job of not sending, drunk 22-year-olds out into the cold?
Yeah. Well, we'll have to wait and see what they're gonna come up with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they just found him like yesterday, right? Or today?
Yeah, today or yesterday. Probably yesterday, and they just reported it today. Add it to the list.
So, I read I'm in the process of reading, Dr. Burgess' books, Killer by Design. And I just wanted to touch on when she speaks in the book about when she first went to the academy and she first started to work with the rest of the agents, how she overcame that barrier of being a woman and being in that room. And I know, again, she does touch on it a little bit in the book about how she did kind of feel out of place and stuff. But as her time continued on throughout there, where was it, or how was she able to overcome that as a woman? Because they did respect her, but it was a different type of things. And obviously the academy now, kind of comparing and contrasting how it was back then and now.
Okay, so she's asking, did you hear the question, Dr. Burgess?
I heard the question, yeah. I think I'll answer it that if you can develop an area of real good expertise, which is what I had done, is the agent needed that. When somebody needs something in law enforcement or the law, whatever, they will come to you. And so my advice is you get yourself pick a small area and get very, very good in it, and develop that expertise so that and you have to write, you have to publish, all of that good academic stuff you have to do, and that gets you known. And that's what I think is very important for women to understand, because we've not been really socialized that way. We've been socialized to do other kinds of things. And I just know when I went down to the academy, they had the evidence right in front of them and they weren't using it. They had the victim. And they wouldn't they weren't paying attention to the victim. They were out doing other things, looking for the suspect, which of course was their job. But I tried to impress upon them that they needed to know all they could about the victim. And that's where the victimology work came. And now they are. I think that they do train in that. And that's something when you go to a crime scene, I'm sure Sarah can say that you've got your victim. What more can you have to learn as much as you can about why was she targeted?
Yeah, and I think, just jumping on that, the more that you can know, not just about the victim in the last week before, she was attacked or whatever, literally everything you can possibly know about that person. And that does mean speaking with families and loved ones and stuff. learn, you know, what their favorite song was and what was the last movie they saw, and not, you know, not, it matters obviously to have like a human connection to the victim, but you really will begin to piece together things. You know, Dr. Burgess always says that a lot of times, particularly with serial offenses or sexually based offenses, the offender may know the victim very, very well, and the victim has no idea that this person even exists. And so the more you know about the victim, the better able you are to understand like the stimuli and response that created this dynamic where the offender then, you know, chose the victim in the moment that they did.
Yeah, because the offender is developing his fantasies. He's playing, and he may be she may be a clerk at a Dunkin' Donuts, and he just goes in every day and builds up this fantasy. She has no idea, you know, she just doing her job. And we used to say they were strangers, and in many cases they aren't. They are strangers. The offender may be a stranger to the victim, but the victim may not be a stranger to the offender. And once you can get that relationship and you start building and building, that at least that's in, of course, in homicide cases, but that's where you have to start.
Question isn't really totally formed yet, but I am particularly interested in like exoneration and innocence work. And I feel like a large theme with a lot of the work in this field is kind of like having to pause yourself from forming like an emotional connection to a certain case or like certain individuals. And I think that is especially more prominent in women because I feel like we have that societal role of having to like empathize and like provide that emotional support in a way. And I'm like, the biggest thing on my mind going into this is like, I might encounter people that are totally guilty, but like may come off innocent to me, and then like I may out of pity take on their case and then like find out that they were like no, and then
That they did it.
yeah. So I'm just wondering how you separate that. Like
I do a fair amount of innocence work as well, because I have come to understand, and I'm sure this makes sense to everybody, is that a wrongful conviction is a cold case. And so to me, I still think that ability to empathize, particularly with the victim, is every bit as important, because really it's just cold case work and you're just starting the investigation from the beginning like anything else. Even if you're working, you know, in the sciences and stuff, I think what you're kind of referring to is almost like a tunnel vision, and we can get tunnel vision in favor of a suspect, as in, oh my God, it has to be this one. And we can get tunnel vision in favor of like, no, it can't be. And so it's important to recognize when that's happening in you. And this is one of the reasons I do think women are underutilized in investigative fields and stuff, is because I think that, I don't want to speak in broad terms, but I think that societally, like, we are taught to try and like see all of that stuff and to feel for everybody and everything. And whether you have that innately or whether it's something you've been conditioned to, as long as you're aware that that's what's happening, I think you'll be fine. Yeah. Dr. Burgess obviously does innocence work too, Menendez brothers.
Oh boy, those Menendez brothers, yeah.
I was just curious, I'm sure you guys all kind of come across cases that are like hard to digest and like gruesome and just difficult to deal with. And I'm just wondering if you guys ever like got overwhelmed or like struggled with coping with it. And if it ever like affected your mental health, and if it did, like how did you deal with that kind of?
Years. So I haven't done casework. I'm still the baby in the field. But I'm a very emotional person. I mean, I've cried in front of my forensic anthropology class like 2 weeks ago. So I don't know. I'm not against having emotions. Like, I think that I'm doing what I'm doing because I am so passionate and so emotional, and I'm just gonna roll with that. So I have a therapist, and I encourage my students to take breaks, usually more than I actively do, because I don't like to take breaks. But knowing when you need a day or a week and being okay with saying like, no, I can't do that, I need a break. And being emotional. If you have emotions, I don't think it helps to really hide behind them. It just makes you more stressed. So being okay with saying no to things, taking breaks, and finding something that you enjoy when your job is very stressful.
Yeah, I agree. I am also very emotional. I cry like it's my job. I can't listen to Taylor ever without crying. But with the casework stuff, I think, I mean, for me, I can feel myself having like a physiological response before I recognize that it's too much in my head. And I've gotten good over time of knowing like, okay, I need to tap out and like watch some New Girl or Cougar Town or something. I call it an emotional shower. It's like just completely, I gotta close all the tabs in my browser because like I don't want these guys like living in it. But I mean, one of the cases we've worked on repeatedly in the Super Sleuths group that we formed is a Dutch case. Actually, Anne, I don't even think I've ever told you this. I have had a harder time with that case than any case I've ever worked. And I'm not entirely sure why, but that is one of the only times like we've been presenting crime scene stuff, and I've worked some incredibly gruesome like mutilation and dismemberment and stuff like that. And there's something about the crime scene photos from that case and just knowing kind of like what was happening for this woman in the moments beforehand that I had to get up and leave in the middle of one of our meetings on the Dutch case. It can be a lot, and who knows why that one hit me the way that it hit me at that particular point, because I've worked on it before and since and been okay, but some things are just gonna hit, and just trust that like physical trauma response. Your body will tell you before your mind does that you need to tap out, and Ms. Davidson's absolutely correct. You can say no, like I can't do this today. I can't do this today.
I can't, but you can.
Yeah. Yeah, Dr. Burgess, how about you? What do you do when it gets to be too much?
Well, I was just gonna say, it almost is that like in therapy, patient doctor therapy, that it's a transference kind of and a countertransference kind of reaction that you're talking about, that something is triggered, like you say, something in the case gets triggered that you don't realize, or not, it's not in your conscious awareness. The important thing would be to try to figure out what it was and why you had to leave, or why you had, the emotional reaction. And that could be very important in your own professional development.
What do you do?
What do I do?
Yeah, or is it never too much? You're you're all right. It's tougher than the rest of us.
Well, I'm older than the rest of you, so I've had a lot more experience, so that makes a difference, I think. I'm just trying to think of where. Well, you have to be careful what your emotions are. For gosh sakes, you can't be in court, and have a reaction when you can't leave. So you have to be able to figure out something to control it. That's the only place that I would get concerned about in terms of talking about cases and so forth. I think we probably should build that in more, of what are people's emotional reaction to what we're talking about. That would be really helpful. Maybe you brought it up. Maybe we should be brief, if you will, after some of our cases, because we don't, right? We
No.
don't, and we really should. I mean, we should have on the I keep thinking of the horse case. I know you're calling it something else, but
Yeah.
so I don't know if it's the horse or the victim or what.
The Dutch police had
The
decided that
Dutch case, yeah, thank you. The Dutch case, yeah.
the horse had not killed this one, so. Yeah. Yeah, but that actually also makes me think like we are finally getting to a place in society where we talk about therapy, like mandated therapy for first responders. But I mean,
Right.
every one of you, if you're gonna work in this field, it is an element of a first responder, and you're gonna experience all the same stuff. So maybe forensics departments need to be talking about introducing classes specifically for therapists to work with, with the people who are diving into these cases.
I think they try to. That's a good point. It is certainly, I think first responders have a terrific job. I mean, that could be, they're going right after something has happened. Which can be really, really overwhelming.
And there's a large increase right now in research on secondary trauma or vicarious trauma of forensic factors. So we're looking at it.
Good, yeah.
Anyone could answer this. If you could choose to specialize in a different branch of forensics, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I wish now that I had done data science, machine learning, computer science type stuff, instead of getting a BFA in dance. Because that is where everything's going, and I don't have that hard computer science background. And I think that's just really applicable to right now. Every field is going to start using some kind of machine learning, computer science, data science thing. But I mean, to be fair to my BFA degree, I think creativity is really important when we do research, because everything that we do has to be new and different. So I'll take that from it, but I wish I had some more computer science background.
Not one damn thing. I'm finally doing what I've been wanting to do, like, since I was 6 years old. I'm good. I wouldn't change that. I'm excited to finally feel like, all right, I'm starting to get a real caseload, and I'm doing work I thought I would have to be with the FBI to do, and instead I get to do some of it in my pajamas at home. So I'm happy as a clam. Thank you.
Dr. Burgess, the question was, if you could change your field of forensics, would you change it? And if so, what different field would you want to do?
What different skills would I want to do if I could?
Like if you weren't a forensic psych nurse,
If I wasn't a forensic scientist,
what would you do?
oh, what would I pick? Music.
So we've got the two artists who decided not to do that anymore.
Yeah, you have to have something that you can really unwind with. And I think music is something I've heard more people, say, what is your favorite song to kind of just, get everything out of your head? And
What's
yours?
What's yours?
I Am Woman.
Oh, yes.
I always talk about that when I put on my bulletproof vest to go into court. I'm marching with that.
Oh my God.
Hear me roar, right?
This question's for Professor Davidson. Seeing that you worked a little bit in London and in the US, what are the major differences between working and seeing how foreign countries, so the US, works with archaeology and anthropology, and here, and what do you think here in the US needs to be changed more to get better results in your work?
So if I'm being honest, anthropologists in the US are really elitist. We like to do everything by ourselves. We call ourselves anthropologists before we call ourselves forensic anthropologists. And I personally think that if we had a more integrated approach and an interdisciplinary environment where we could take the skills that we have as anthropologists and then the skills that other forensic scientists and investigators have and come together, we would get so much more done than saying that we can just do everything by ourselves. And there's also, in order for you right now to take the exam to be a certified forensic anthropologist, you need to have a PhD. Even though there are plenty of master's programs you can come out with incredible skills, you're not even allowed to take the exam. So we have a strong elitism thing happening in our field. And for a field that's supposed to be not ethnocentric, I feel like we could be better, because it's not like that in the UK. They're a lot more integrated and interdisciplinary. So that would be my ideal thing, is that we're nicer to other people.
Play well with others.
All right, I think we have time for one or two more questions. So if you have any burning questions, raise your hands. Yes.
So I write songs, but I'm also a biology psychology major, so I really like research, and I was just wondering, because I heard Dr. Davidson mention it earlier, how can I apply my creativity, if all of you want to answer it, to researching like exactly.
Sure. So the first thing I would say is you have to read all the research. You need to know everything that's out there before you can start to look at it. But I find the easiest way for me to get new ideas is to speak to people who are not in my field about the problems that I'm trying to solve. Because the diversity in those backgrounds bring a lot more ideas to the table. And allowing yourself to do things that people haven't done before, because it's never been done, which means you can do it. There's a study that can be published on it. And you have a different background than other people. So allowing yourself to look at things with the background influencing your decision-making will allow you to have a broader approach and use your creativity and your background in other aspects.
I think it's gonna happen for you without you even realizing it, because if you're identifying as, like, you're identifying as somebody for whom music is front of mind, and then also that the sciences are, that is happening without you even trying, and it's going to influence what you do.
I guess going off that, like if I have a research study that I've done, basically, how do I publish it? Or like get it published?
I think you guys should stop.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
step one is going to be finding a journal that you want to publish it in, and there'll be instructions on there, but I'm happy to talk to you after this in trying to find a journal that your research will fit in.
Cool, thanks guys. Does Dr. Burgess have any input on that? I don't know.
Dr. Burgess, do you have any input on how to get research published? What is?
How to get research published? You can always get it published. I like to suggest that people team up, not try to write a single article, but try to team up. And I've heard the interdisciplinary approach is always good. And there's always going to be, there are different levels of publishing. And for all of you, I think you would start off maybe just working on even just doing a good case example, and some how you went about it. And it can be published in there are a number of startup journals. The Academy of Forensic Nursing is new. They're always looking for articles. I really recommend that. And some of I don't know if there are any other journals, they're mental health journals, mental psychiatric nursing journals. And then in your own field, whatever your own field is, I know anthropology must have a lot of possible journals, yeah, because they're a well-established field, we'll say. And then I don't know, Sarah, where you're publishing. Law enforcement certainly has a number of journals that.
Yeah, I'm publishing podcasts.
Yeah, that's good. No, those are very popular, and if people, you can cite them, they can be very good citation. So absolutely.
But, all right, yeah. She says they study podcasts in class, so all right.
I listened to yours, one of my classes.
Yeah, we do that with our students. We try to get to have our students join our papers. So they've done some work. Probably Loyola doing some of that too, some of the professors.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, audience, for being so, I don't know, so willing to participate. I guess let's just give a humongous round of applause for. And unfortunately, Dr. Burgess, we would love to give you this gift virtually, but I've already talked to you. You will have yours coming in the mail. But we have something to show our immense appreciation for our speakers today.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks. Yes. It's just all right here.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. This has been such a great event, and I am so happy to see all of you here. Thank you guys, and have a great rest of your night.
Thank you for arranging it. Thank you very much, you and your staff and your committee.